Thank you, everyone. Does everyone have some sugar in your system so we can get through these last couple hours? Excellent. So we're going to just do some quick introductions and then get started. My name is Samaya Maadu. I'm VP of Consulting at Change Catalyst and have extensive background in education as well as corporate training for career development, leadership development, and now diversity. So excited to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Ortiz, and I'm the Senior Diversity and Inclusion Consultant at Oracle. I'm charged with managing our strategic partnerships and also building out and implementing our disability inclusion strategy. I've been with Oracle for about 9 months, which feels like about 2 years in technology terms. Prior to that, I was in the health insurance industry for about 18 years, working specifically in diversity and inclusion for 12 of those 18 years.
Hello, my name is John Moore. I'm with Sprint, and I've been with Sprint for 22 years. And my primary role with Sprint is I'm a National Customer Relations Manager. I oversee relay contracts for all of our states with Sprint, the 33 states. I also support international accounts with the relay services, and I also do the wireless for the blind and low vision. And I've been with diversity and inclusion for 4 years with Sprint. I'm the president for persons with disabilities.
My name is Courtney Jensen, and I'm the Community Relations and Development Director for a very small nonprofit organization called Mindshift. We're an organization that works specifically with including the incredible abilities of people with autism, and specifically Asperger's in the working world, specifically in technology. And I'm also the mother of a child on the spectrum, so I have a very high interest in having these unique people included in the workforce.
And hi, everybody. Michael Coyle. I am Principal Program Manager for Diversity and Inclusion at PG&E, or Pacific Gas and Electric. For those of you who are local, you probably heard about us or have seen our blue trucks driving around your neighborhood. And I've been at PG&E just shy of 9 years, which at that organization, long tenures are common, so I feel like I've also just started. So time moves differently in different industries, and I do want to call out, I am well represented with our ERG president in the audience, Leanne, for our Access ERG network that's celebrated 5 years. So thanks for being here too, Leanne.
Excellent. Well, we'll get started. As you all know, this panel is just going to talk about various ways that organizations can retain individuals with disabilities and be able to support them and make their environments more inclusive. So my first question is, using technology for this. So at your respective organizations or organizations that you work with, who are point persons or departments that both people with disabilities or managers can go to in order to gain assistance in supporting employees? So anyone can answer first.
I'm happy to start us out. Because we have a physical workforce, and that's really 75% of our workforce of 23,000 employees. So it may be a little bit different than some of the more pure technology work environments, but we have a dedicated department at our organization, which is really kind of impressive to just learn about. As I work with them, it's not really in human resources, but really sits in our benefits organization, which actually is a shared services organization now. But they're called Access and Accommodations, and a big part of the work that they do is actually called return to work. So in a physical work environment, injuries are not, unfortunately, uncommon. So there are 5 individuals on that team that are fully dedicated to different lines of business to help folks either injuries, return to work, or if they're joining the organization, accommodations and and as life happens, accommodations, whether it's work-related or not. So that's our primary organization, but I am also proud to say we have in EEO, I've got a couple of peers who are in EEO where folks go through opportunities to self-ID when they do join the organization, or where we put through a survey last year, like a lot of organizations have. So we've got a couple of point spots is sort of my short answer, but it's kind of maybe unique to a field-based workforce.
Yeah, just to add, at Sprint, all my managers are deaf, hard of hearing, and I've gone through process for accommodation, and so when there are times where there's other accommodations are needed, so that the employee can talk to me directly, and then I refer them to HR, and we have an HR process that is a team that handles all the accommodation requests. And one of the things what's nice, what we do, we have a separate budget, because a lot of times when there's an accommodation, managers get afraid, well, this is going to impact my budget or my line item. Well, that's not the case. We have a separate budget assigned for accommodations in the workplace, and so we refer there. I just went through a recent one was a software request, and we put the process in place, and then the expense came to me. I was able to modify the cost center and reflect to the HR for accommodation. So those are all good. We also do involuntary and company-wide for self-disclose for employees to have the opportunity to put on their profile that they do have a disability, and so that we have a way for employees to feel like they have a place they can do it. They don't have to go to their manager. They can do it online as well.
And similarly, at Oracle, we do have a process in place for individuals to request accommodations. There's a phone number and an email address. We also have an accommodations task force that meets about every other month, and it's a cross-functional, cross-divisional team of individuals. So you have benefits, diversity and inclusion, which is myself, human resources, legal, and facilities, and just use that as a mechanism to keep those lines of communication open. And on specifically the diversity and inclusion team in my role is really looking to build that education, awareness, and skill set at the enterprise level. And what I find is most individuals, even though the information's out there, they're not aware of the resources available. So just having conversations with individuals, was on the phone with a gentleman from Orlando who works from home, and just educating him on the process where you could find that information, because Oracle is a huge company, 130,000 employees. How do you find the information on the intranet? So trying to think creatively as well to make individuals aware. So we just sent a message as part of the accommodations task force to HR, just, hey, these resources are available in case some of your clients have questions. So it's repetition, raising that awareness, and continuing that dialogue with individuals.
It's really exciting to be here and hear about so many companies that are doing the kinds of work that your companies are doing. But unfortunately, I think for a lot of companies, at least the ones that we work with, they're smaller companies. They don't have the number of employees to put some of these programs in place. We're actually a contractor. We hire individuals and then we place them in the workforce. So we're a little bit different. And one of the things that we're finding to remove some of that fear around accommodation and disability communities, what we've found is as a contractor, if there are employees and we are helping them through the process, it has made it a lot easier for those companies to accommodate. Because in order for them to come in through us, they are already disclosing what their disability is. And it gives us the opportunity to go in and work with the point person within that organization. And in smaller organizations, what we're finding is all you need is one point person that cares about disability. It doesn't have to be a specific HR person. It doesn't have to be a specific process. So if any of you are here from smaller companies, just be encouraged that having someone who cares, that employees can talk to and feel comfortable with is the first step. And I just really want to encourage that, because I know when I hear some of the programs that other companies have, it can be a little daunting.
Excellent, and thank you for sharing that. I know different organizations that are all different levels, and size does matter, but in a lot of cases it doesn't, right? Some large companies don't still have a lot of resources, so it's great to hear the varying perspectives. So the next question are, one thing we heard as we were building this conference is some of the persons with disabilities say that they don't always feel included. and you're alienated of sorts, especially if maybe you're hearing impaired or you have a disability that prevents you from communicating with individuals. So how do you build community? What are some things that you've seen that have been that have worked to help build community, to build inclusiveness, not only socially, but also in terms of decision making and making decisions for both customer products or internal projects that you're working on?
I can explain my experience with Sprint. When I first joined Sprint, it was a great experience because the HR manager was deaf. She signed, and my supervisor directly signed, and so just the culture of having 4 or 5 of us in a call center of 500 people, that was all I really needed, just to have that opportunity to socialize and become friends. And that is really important, to feel part of the workforce, the social aspect, because often deaf, hard of hearing, when you are alone, it's very difficult to feel like you're part of it. So really, I just encourage, expanding the workforce, and that the social will be very positive. The other, I just encountered a whole new situation last year. Is most of my team are all deaf and hard of hearing. I hire a woman who's blind, low vision, and we have staff meetings, and all of my staff meetings are on video. And I also have a manager in Auckland, New Zealand, who's got his interpreter. We have an ASL interpreter, and we have CART going across our screen. And then we have my manager, who is based with me in Denver, Colorado. And so we all call in, so we have to self-identify who's talking and provide voice description. And like for example, we had administrative assistant day. We all put signs up, and we took turns going around on each video screen with 10 of us, just reading exactly, so we make sure everybody's included. So it's opened that discussion and building that team together. It doesn't matter, what I'm saying here is just work together, getting through the process.
And when I engage individuals in conversation in organization, one of the things I educate them on is asking who's not here that needs to be here. So that perspective, and really educating them on having the processes in place. So if you are coordinating, let's say we have these videos at Oracle called Life at Oracle videos, and it profiles an employee. It's part of our employment branding, and it really provides an opportunity for individuals to speak about their experience as an Oracle employee, but there was no captioning on the videos. So after some intervention with the diversity and inclusion team and having dialogue, the videos now have caption available. So it's having those conversations, but instead of being reactive, being proactive. So the next time a video is created, okay, do we have captioning available on these videos? And it's a conversation that takes place one at a time, but really trying to change the culture. So having accessibility in mind at the forefront. And we do have an accessibility office at Oracle that looks at our products and the accessibility of products as well. And I have 2 colleagues here with me, Bruce and Darrow, who joined me for the session today. So, and leveraging things like your affinity groups. Oracle does have an Employees with Disabilities affinity group. And as part of the disability inclusion strategy that I'm charged with implementing, looking to develop a disability ERG as well.
I think that one of the keys for having people within your workforce feel included and feel heard is setting up a culture within your organization in which that happens naturally. I don't think it's something that you can set up as easily as we would like to say you could. So one of our business partners is an organization called Apario. They work with tractor navigation and airplane navigation. They hired one of what we call specialists, one of our employees that has autism. And when they brought him in, not only did they have us train his direct supervisor, they had us train the staff that he was going to be working with. And then over time, without us encouraging them to do this, they started asking their company, their staff, how they felt about having this individual there. And consistently, what everyone said is, I like working for an organization that cares enough to bring someone in who's maybe a little bit different than what we had anticipated the workforce to look like, and cared enough to explain to us what his needs might be, what our reactions might be. And they said that it's increased their their comfort with disclosing their own issues and their own needs, because everyone has needs. We're all individuals, and whether it's an identifiable disability or preferences, the workforce is a happier place when all of us can be who we are as individuals, and that starts from the company being willing to listen, being willing to educate, and having those examples of people with disabilities that are brought in really beautiful, seamless ways. And it can be just one person to start with. And so it doesn't have to be huge.
I love that. I love the ideas that I'm getting from hearing from all of you too. It's so rewarding being on the panel already. I can share really. I think it is culture and it is resources, like you've each said. And it's only been 5 years, as I mentioned, with our ERG, right, with the Access ERG, which does a lot to really bring in, I think, visibility, which is really important for folks to sort of see and look at things differently, which is really important. One of the things that we also, just from a cultural standpoint, it's very important to our employees, or rather very impactful to our employees, when they see leaders who are really involved or who also self-identify. So we do have executive leaders for all of our ERGs, but we have additionally a VP who came out about her disability. And that was really helpful, I think, just in terms of, really changing and shifting mindsets for folks. And we really hope to grow that, in all honesty, because we know it impacts more than probably just one of our senior leadership team. But we've also found that one of the biggest hurdles when we went through our self-ID process in 2015, middle of the year, still a lot of maybe not I guess, clear awareness around just the whole scale and scope of disabilities and what might qualify for individuals. So that's a process that we're continuing to look at building upon. How do we kind of help folks know what could that be, and how, not drawing conclusions or jumping to stereotypes is really important. So I'm thinking about some of the things you guys said and some of the resources that we can probably continue to develop.
One of the other things that we've started doing is with our population of people that we're working with specifically, we have been talking to them about how much they have interest in educating the rest of the people they work with. And we've started to host lunch and learns in the businesses. And then what's happened is, after we go in and we talk about autism and autism spectrum disorder, other staff have gone to their leadership and said, well, could we do something specifically on hearing impairment? And so it's brought other people who are maybe not then disclosing, but they're at least showing an interest in having other people educated about something that they care about.
Yep.
So it's been pretty powerful to see people come forward with that as well.
Well, I just want to add, for my team, we have ASL and some user voice and sign, so we have a mixture on our team. And at Sprint, we have a state and federal contracts, so we have to do compliances. Well, these are very detailed language, legal stuff, and some of our managers really struggle understanding that. Just because of a training video that's out, there's captioning. Well, it may not work for that individual, so we need to have an ASL translation to occur, and so we provide video on those. So it's really understanding the workforce and really striving to a lot more options, giving them just 2 or 3 options instead of just, this is the one way it's going to be captioned, we won't have interpreters. So we're finding that some situations where you come in, it's only going to be captioned, well, I prefer ASL. So that's where it's very important that we always give choices to.
And I think what I'm hearing too is that exposure is important, right? But with any change, and most of you know this, when you're at an organization, some big change happens and you grumble and you grumble and you don't understand it. And then 2 years later, you're like, oh yeah, that was new and I had a hard time with it. And now it's normal, right? So I think what I'm hearing from you all is, exposure is important. It may be difficult or you don't understand it, but just not just being open to it and knowing that it's okay that you don't understand it. But once you do it once, it's normal and it catches on, kind of what you're saying as well.
Absolutely, and I think that with the organization that we work with, businesses are very hesitant to onboard people with autism. People with autism, on the whole, tend to not communicate in the same way. They don't maybe make eye contact. They don't make their interviewer feel comfortable in an interview. They communicate differently and in a way that makes people uncomfortable. What we found is it'll sometimes take 2 years for us to convince a business that we have an individual who is not only a good match, but is a better match for this job than anyone they've interviewed so far, because this person's very, very detail oriented and likes repetition. So in tech, in QA testing, that just makes sense, right? Someone who likes repetition, who likes that kind of work, isn't going to get bored, they're not going to move on, they're not going to have the turnover. But it'll take 2 years to convince a business. They'll get one person placed. It'll take a little while for that culture to start to shift, and all of a sudden, we're starting to see the fruits of that. And they're coming back to us and they're saying, this was new, this was uncomfortable. But now, here we are, we've seen the value of this individual, and now bring more of them into our workforce. And then where else can we be looking? What other invisible populations of talent exist? And that conversation is happening in Fargo, North Dakota, where I'm from, in a really beautiful way, but it's taken time.
Excellent. So I know, Michael, you've talked a lot about the process you went through of self-identifying. There are a lot of persons with disabilities that work for organizations. I personally have one, and as I have thought about looking for work and have taken on responsibilities, I'm like, oh, should I disclose, and how much should you say? It's something you always worry about in retaliation, right? So when you're looking at that process in terms of identifying people, self-identifying people, figuring out how to track these individuals, right? Because we know they're there, they're just not speaking up, right? So what kind of processes do you have internally to do that? And maybe we'll start with you, because you've kind of shared with it, and then for the rest of you, if you haven't identified a process, what are you thinking about? How are you tracking the people that you already know? And what kind of comfort around that are you providing, so where they don't feel the angst of coming out? So I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So when I mentioned that self-ID sort of survey, employee survey, we rolled that out last summer, so almost a year ago. It'll be a year in July and August. It really required a lot of support communication, right? Because there's definitely a lot of apprehension. How is this going to be stored? Who's going to have access to it? We had to be really clear that that was really going to remain within the diversity and inclusion department, and so that is basically locked down data. So it's only shared in aggregate company-wide as a percentage. And we did, I think, a fairly decent job of emphasizing that in multiple communications that went out. But, that was just the first time it was done. So folks, as they're hired, can certainly disclose and are encouraged to. As well as you can go in and change it at any time and update it, because we know that's a reality, but we haven't sort of launched that ongoing campaign yet in terms of letting folks know that they can do that. We're still actually getting those forms in, which is really a good sign that they're kind of still coming in, even though it's almost a year later. So I think it's growing, but I think it's like you have to really keep talking about it, and I think you have to have leaders, as I shared, who are also self-identifying and disclosing, because it's not, once you see that, then you realize, you could realize, I'm not saying that'll shift it for everybody, but I think it helps.
And at Oracle, we do have a compliance area, and individuals have the opportunity to voluntarily self-disclose during the recruitment process and then when they're onboarding. But what I'm finding is there is still this trust So it's having those conversations with individuals. So even performing the interactive process, when somebody requests an accommodation, I'm explicit in mentioning that when they get their forms filled out by their doctor, you do not have to disclose a specific disability, because in conversations I've had with some of our community partners, individuals are being told by certain organizations or even their families, you need to mainstream, don't disclose your disability. But my personal philosophy is, if you have a culture of inclusion, if you have that communication, respect, and trust, and it really is between the employee and the manager, if that trust is there, they'll be more inclined to disclose. And of course, we have the process in place to keep that information confidential, but it really is that relationship with that manager and the employee that will influence whether they decide to disclose. So if you're my manager, Samaya, you know what, I need an accommodation, this is the situation, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, it really is a one-size-fits-one approach.
And just to add, we just recently did the email blast, to self-identified, and we also, with our ERGs, persons with disabilities, they include our information into the email so that it is available for resources, and so we just include that as part of the ERG. That is a helpful process to give the insurance to people who want to self-identify, and then there's a resource available if necessary.
We've been talking a lot in our office. We're a very small office ourselves. Again, we contract with a lot of other businesses, but we've been talking a lot in our office about how disability is as different, as you said, as the person is. And there might be common characteristics that you have in a group of people, but each person is an individual. And that's where we see the most success, where people are the most comfortable coming out and sharing, is that they're viewed as an individual by the company that they work for. They're viewed as a person and not a job description. And another piece of that for us has been being able to identify the really positive characteristics about the populations of people that we work with, because any disability, that person is going to bring a perspective to your company that you don't have without that person. We talk about technology. Technology exists to solve a problem, and every one of us has problems, and all of our problems are unique. And so when we bring unique people to the table, we have unique ability to solve problems for the world. And it's such a powerful thing. And as we see companies start to make that shift in their mindset of a person, not a job description, that's when people really do start to feel safe, I think, to share and to disclose, and then to be able to support one another in a way that's totally different. One of the things we're finding as we're working with autism is these are people who have never wanted to disclose this about themselves. It's an invisible disability for the most part. And we've encouraged them, no, tell people. And people rise. When you share your needs, when you share your problems, on the whole, we are our best selves as humans when we're called to action. And so there's power in that. And when we can represent that in the companies that we work for, that kindness, that inclusivity, then I think that we all are better and we all rise.
Well, and I think what's beautiful about that is when you have those conversations, someone's like, oh yeah, I have a cousin that's autistic, or my neighbor has cerebral palsy, or, right? Those are the conversations that come out. And then it just humanizes everyone, because we all do know someone that has some kind of disability, and the more that you have access to them in the workplace, it also provides an opportunity to become more comfortable with it. So, excellent. Okay, so we have just one more question, and for those of you who are not aware, ERGs, we've mentioned it before, is an employee resource group, just so you know what that is. Just really quickly, could you share just one way, if you work with an ERG, one way your ERG has helped your company either internally or externally with your products? And that'd be great.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. As one thing that being president for the person with disabilities at Sprint as the ERG, one of the things that I find is when I go to conferences, Sprint sent me here to be participating in this conference, and I'm really fortunate to work for a company that's very promotive of this. And when I go to some of the other conferences, And it's sort of, I think this is a special, unique place, because the history here at CTP, and when I go to other conferences, there's a big gap with person with disabilities attending. They're not part of HR, so there needs to be more involvement. And one of the things that really kind of bothers me is that they low talk about people with disabilities, entry-level jobs, and just fires me up. I don't like that. So I think there needs to be a lot more work to get this movement to get these attitudes out of the way that, it's entry-level workforce. No, I mean, it's every level up. My director is hard of hearing himself. When we sign, and I'm very fortunate to have that work environment. But when I go to these conferences, there's a lot of gaps. There's the interpreting quality is not that good. I had a Flat Island interpreter out. Why? And then the captioning was put on a wall. These were big companies were there. They're not, and that concerns me. We need to see more people with disabilities continue to get into this workforce and make change happen. And so that's kind of something that I feel as the ERG president with Sprint, I'm hoping that we can continue to move that. And one of the things that we're trying to do is put information out weekly about activities that we're doing, partnership with the communities. That's a big deal for us is those relationship with vision walks that we're sponsoring, and our ERG is participating as well. So create that awareness and then that foundation of feeling that eventually, if a person has a hidden disability, they feel safe to disclose.
Yeah, I would say too, we're on definitely a growth journey when it comes to many examples of how we're impacting our actual product and service. But I can say, I was pleasantly surprised when last year I was responsible for filling out the Disability Equality Index survey, which was inaugural year last year. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by all of the things that we were doing and that we did have in place. But one of the things we really recognize is bringing more awareness to that, frankly. But we had all these procedures in different sort of parts of the company, but without sort of a holistic view of things that we were doing. And I would say, speaking back to the ERG specifically, we've also had the pleasure of our previous presidents for the ERG have been in pretty strategic roles themselves. So one of our first before Leanne was in customer organization, which is like uniquely positioned to be able to inform the customer experience, which is huge, and I think gets to your question. And before that, Fiona, our previous president, had been in our multicultural communications organization. And so we talked about some of her ability to influence disability awareness and perspective from multicultural perspective. So from the Chinese community, which she is a member of, but also the Latino community, which she works very closely with in all of that communications and branding. So that's been really strategic, and I think we're still seeing the kind of cascade of benefits that we're trying to quantify around how huge that is, right? And I think we're from the diversity and inclusion organization, we really try to amplify the value of individuals with regular strategic jobs, right, at the company who also happen to be taking on these voluntary roles of being ERG members, and really trying to amplify the impact that they have. But I would say we're still growing there, and we'd love to be able to spend even more time kind of talking about that.
Well, and Michael mentioned a survey, and I would encourage individuals from organizations, and I know it varies by size. It's a good exercise to go through because you'll see what kind of questions. So they may ask questions on accessibility, products or services, information for employees, and it's a good barometer for where your organization is. And you don't even have to formally submit it if you just want to read the questions to because the nature of the questions will let you know what some other organizations are doing. So that's a good exercise. I know Michael mentioned the Disability Equality Index, and I know Springboard Foundation or Springboard Consulting Group, which is in the disability space, puts out another survey as well. So this information is out there and accessible, and realize your organization or company is its own entity. So what works in one organization may not necessarily work for your organization, and that's where you come in as the individual, just assessing your organizational readiness, having those courageous conversations, and implementing what makes sense for your organization so people can focus on being productive at work and contributing to the organization's success.
For us, we don't specifically have ERGs. We're very small. But one thing we've been doing is a little bit of more around a community conversation and talking to different disability groups around access to jobs. What are their barriers to access to jobs from their perspective, and having conversations, what does that look like and why do those barriers exist? You know, one of the barriers that we're starting to see is education. There are certain disabilities where it is very difficult to get a traditional education, but that doesn't mean that you're not still qualified for a job because you don't necessarily have the degree. And so that's one of the things that we've really been discussing locally. Fargo's in a job crisis. We have way more jobs open than we have people to fill them, and yet we have populations of people who are not being utilized, who have a ton to add. And so that's sort of where some of our conversations, maybe not specifically fitting into that ERG category, have been happening.
So we're going to open it up to questions. We have a mic here if anyone had any quick questions before we close.
Hi, my name is Alicia. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, and I'm sorry I'm hiding over here in the corner. I'm here from Airbnb. I was flown down from our Portland office. I'm actually now the official point of contact launching our own ERG for employees with disabilities. I myself have an invisible disability. I have severe rheumatoid arthritis, and I realized there wasn't representation within the company or resources for it. So I guess my question to you is, as we forge into, creating this, because I'm just one person trying to figure out how to make this work, what advice would you have for ERGs for disabilities beginning out, if you had one important piece of advice to begin with?
We started the ERG for persons with disabilities about 4 years ago, and just one statistic I recently learned that only of all the companies that have ERGs, 47% have disability ERGs. So over 50% of the companies have ERGs don't have disabilities as part of the ERGs. So how we started is that we started in the Denver market area because, Sprint, we have 30,000 employees. So we just localize it first. And that's the first step we did. We needed a goal of membership. So we had, like, I wouldn't say like a fair at the, we set up a booth, displayed, we created a logo, and then once we reached that number, I think it was like 60 at the time, and then we would go back to our HR saying, look, we have created a local ERG here, and then once we got the interest of showing the numbers, and then we became as part of the big acceptance of the ERG for Sprint. So we started localizing, and then we just got bigger, and then now we have different parts of the areas of the country where we have ERGs that have local chapters. So that's how we started. Yep.
And based on my experience with ERGs, two things I would say is don't try to do it alone. You can't do it all. And secondly, it really helps to have those ERG guidelines in place, so really drive what your ERG does and does not do.
That is all great advice. I can add, I'm a shameless benchmarker, and our organization and leadership team really demands that, and sometimes we're totally okay from PG&E because, after all, Airbnb is a big customer, and I'm a personal customer. We would say you can really shamelessly benchmark us. I think we're more than happy to put you in touch with Leanne and the leadership team or myself, please hit me up. Everybody here should hit me up on LinkedIn if that interests you. Just do the quick search and it should be there, and we can hopefully put you in touch. The one external site that I would recommend too, Diversity Best Practices is all one continuous word on .com, is a website that also, and a membership organization of which we're a member, shares a lot of stuff publicly, white papers, et cetera. So there's information there around ERGs and starting up that is really great, and they have a conference that's going to be coming up in the fall here for the first time on the West Coast, which is NALC, National Affinity Leadership Conference. And that's really about benchmarking for all ERGs and in affinity groups, and a great place to, I think, connect with more folks. And it's going to be in the Bay Area. So we're thrilled to be involved with that and having it on the West Coast, which is great.
And I'm sorry we don't have any more time for questions, but thank you for sharing that. And thank you, panel. I learned a lot in this 45 minutes, so round of applause.